the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact. Stevens alum and a friend of the program. So DJ is the manager of global sustainability at Colgate-Palmolive. He leads the implementation of plans focused on Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions reduction. At Colgate, DJ also supports various cross-functional teams and task forces, including manufacturing and sustainable sourcing. His key role is executing the Renewable Energy Master Plan to achieve 100% renewable electricity by 2030. And that is what he's going to talk to you guys about today. Actually, like again, in 2011, so you graduated in 2014, right?
2014, yeah.
And 2011, you joined Colgate-Palmolive as an intern.
As a co-op, in the co-op program.
Okay, and then continuing full-time with the company upon graduation. Wow,
that's correct.
Great. So DJ graduated with a BE in environmental engineering and a minor in green engineering. He got his MS degree from Johns Hopkins University in environmental management. So as I said today, DJ will talk about Colgate-Palmolive's journey to 100% renewable electricity by 2030. Welcome, DJ.
Thank you so much, Professor Dibbs, and thank you for the kind words. Thank you for your patience again as I was getting into the meeting. Let me pull up my slides, and I'll wait for you guys to confirm, make sure you can see it.
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'll jump in. I'm excited to talk to members of the Stevens community. Again, as an alum, this is especially a cool opportunity for me. So before I jump into the material, I wanted to thank the sponsors for the seminar series. It's a great opportunity for me to come in here and speak to you all. So appreciate those that helped to make this possible. So let's dive in. So this is going to be a presentation kind of covering our renewable electricity journey, but I do want to make sure I call out, our climate action strategy and our overall approach to get to net zero. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but actually this slide, I borrowed the cover from our 2023 annual climate action report, just hot off the press. Colgate-Palmolive Company issued their 2024 version of this report yesterday. So if I had a little bit more of a reaction time, I might have put in the updated cover. But anyway, you can see the power of we, accelerating action on climate change for all people, their pets, and our planet is what we titled on the previous version of this report. What I'm going to take everybody through is the background, kind of the why behind pursuing renewable energy, how we have that goal set up within Colgate, 100% renewable electricity by 2030, and then hopefully get to the point where we also have time for questions when we break it at 6. But roughly speaking, this is kind of how we broke out the agenda. And yeah, so to introduce everybody to Colgate-Palmolive, how we think about sustainability. Hopefully everyone has thought about Colgate and used products in their daily lives, whether that be our toothpaste or our dish soap, personal care products. We also own Hill's Pet Food division, so perhaps you're feeding your pets and the furrier members of your family with Hill's Pet Food. But at Colgate-Palmolive, our mission is, we're really proud to be the Colgate brand to be in more homes than any other. So we can and we will create a healthier and more sustainable future for all. The company actually commissioned surveys to help understand how many households around the world have some type of Colgate-Palmolive product in them. And what we found is Colgate-Palmolive, up there with brands like Coca-Cola, is literally in more households around the world than any other. So we think that's a really proud achievement and certainly a responsibility to ensure then we're doing the right things with that brand and the right things with that type of um, penetration around the world. So we refer to our sustainability and social impact strategy, where we'll eventually get into what we're doing on climate change and renewable energy. We call it our SMILE strategy. And what we do is we incorporate social aspects of opportunities to, improve the world and work in communities. So we borrow the S from social. Because of this opportunity that we have to be in so many homes and interact with so many lives, we also bring that component, helping millions of homes. We bring in the MIL, and then borrowing the E from all the actions we incorporate into our preserving our environment ambition, we end up with SMILE, which I think is a nice way to kind of connect our brand and our toothpaste back to what we're doing overall with sustainability and social impact. So I thought before I really dive deeply into the climate part of this, I'd touch on just more broadly, what are the other actions that we're kind of doing in this area? And while we have many, we have 11, we have kind of four that stand out in terms of where we really like to, um, broadcast and communicate sort of core strengths of Colgate-Palmolive. There's a lot of companies doing work in sustainability and social impact. We think these four are the ones that help us to stand out. So I'll briefly cover the three, the one in social and the two across the center of the screen, millions of homes and preserving our environment. But then I'll end on accelerating action on climate change, where we'll transition into kind of the renewable energy piece. So on the social side, what programs are we doing to help children, their families, and communities thrive? One of our most well-known programs is called Bright Smiles, Bright Futures, BSBF for short. And what that program does is actually, it's a fully funded a program under Colgate-Palmolive through the use of vans and other mobile stations. We actually go out and reach to educate and partner with communities around the world to educate them on oral health, especially young people, educate them on what it really means to maintain your oral health, how to properly brush your teeth. We've rehabilitated um, places for many of these children to actually learn in, including schools and places around the world. Since started in 1991, we've been operating for 33 years. Through this program, we've reached actually over 1.7 billion children and their families. And what these children do when they come to these BSBF bands or stations or workshops, they bring home education material so they can help educate their friends, their family, and loved ones who may or may not be aware of these kind of habits, how to brush your teeth, how to make sure you're maintaining oral hygiene, how important that is for your overall health and well-being. And we're really excited to say this program is completely free of charge, and all the education and resources that are distributed are for the communities and the families that receive them to keep. So really proud of this program, proud to say that it's still going and really only expanding. The next piece that I wanted to cover, which I think is another noteworthy piece for us, is what we're doing on products and packaging. So the first of its kind recyclable tube was actually introduced by Colgate-Palmolive in North America. This format, the soft, pliable plastic that a lot of products actually come in, if you think about what you see in the supermarket or the pharmacy, the drugstore, for many years was made of a laminate material that was not recyclable, could only be landfilled. Colgate-Palmolive, and through the use of our intellectual property and 7, 8 years of research and funding, finally got to the point that we created a fully plastic, fully recyclable toothpaste tube that can be recycled in North America in most curbside programs when empty. So help to spread the word. I'm particularly very proud of this. It's extremely exciting to open up a carton of toothpaste, recycle the carton, and then be able to recycle the tube when you're done enjoying it. So just a couple areas that I wanted to make sure we mentioned before we get into the climate change aspect. Without further ado, now that we've touched on kind of two other examples, I want to touch on accelerating action on climate change. So what are we doing to help to get to a state of decarbonization and net zero. As I mentioned, each year we actually write an extended report talking about our efforts and programs. I'm really only going to glean the surface here today and dive into one important program, which is how we're sourcing energy for our operations. But you can see here our 2023 version of the report, which I kind of introduced in the beginning. The first section, the first main header, is really all about our background and how we got to the point that today we have a science-based target approved for net zero by 2040. That didn't come by luck or by chance. It's really built onto a long-standing program of decarbonization, although we didn't always call it that, and sustainability going all the way back to the early 2000s. We're extremely proud to say that according to SBTI, and they validated this for us, in 2022, we were actually the first multinational company in our sector to get this science-based target, net zero approved target. So target setting is a really important way to kind of set intention, make sure that our consumers and customers know we believe in the science and we believe in kind of the vetting process and the robustness to ensure our trajectory, our plans will put us on the proper path to get to net zero. So what do those specific targets look like? We have both short-term and long-term targets. You can see them listed here. But you can see right there in the center, one extremely critical aspect for us to make progress in this decarbonization journey is to achieve a state of 100% renewable electricity sourcing by 2030. So when we got this goal approved, we knew that we needed to really accelerate our efforts to source renewable electricity. At the time, I want to say we were only around the 30% mark, 20 or 30% mark in terms of how much of our electricity was being sourced by renewables at all of our facilities, all of our operations around the world. So we knew where we needed to get to, and we knew where we were starting from. We knew we needed a strategy to really build out a plan to really scale. So the strategy for renewable electricity, like the other targets, we then started working with teams to really build out and create more of a framework to get to scope 1, 2, and 3 milestone goals and achieve that overall state of net zero by 2040, or at least put us on the track to get there. So the strategy itself, like we had mentioned from the SBTI portion, so very much influenced by the targets that they set out for us. We then took those targets and incorporated even more additional internal targets that kind of ladder up to the mandated targets and milestones that SBTI set. We're still in progress of doing that. And then thought a lot about the how. So across all portions of our carbon footprint, energy, raw material sourcing, logistics, etc., how do we then start to create the roadmaps, projects, and initiatives that need to be in place at each of our sites and all of our divisions around the world to get to that point, to get to that state where we're hitting those milestones. So we built a carbon strategy framework, or Colgate Climate Action Strategy Framework. You can see that's shown here, which actually has 5 different aspects. So supply chain engagement, how we're working with our global supply chain on getting engaged on this goal and having the right teams and resources in place to start to achieve it. Getting to net zero in our operations, so then what we're doing for decarbonizing and getting to those lower levels of carbon emissions, hopefully year on year. Working with, because we're such a large company and have this reach with consumer facing goods, working with our R&D organization to start to think about the products themselves. How can we build more sustainable products and design more sustainable products? And listening to our consumers, thinking about their habits and where they have opportunities to improve their lifestyle, their daily habits. How can they use less water enabled by our products and what we design and sell? Business resilience is another important aspect of us incorporating into this strategy. So yes, there are very important reasons to decarbonize that just tie to regulation or because we want to heed the call from our consumers. We want to do the right thing. But also when we think about this changing world that we live in, even in the 1.5 degrees C scenario, we know there will be massive changes to the environment in the form of physical risks, sea sea level rise and global temperature change, events of that nature. So real smart, long-term thinking around how we can play our part as Colgate-Palmolive, we like to think of as truly a business, good for the business strategy. It's a good resilience strategy. So we have kind of a whole line of thinking and framework around that. Lastly, and I'll just touch on this briefly, um, the climate's really interconnected to everything that we do. So decarbonizing both has a direct impact on society and nature, our natural world, which in turn have impacts on us. So it's good business to think through those impacts, risks, and opportunities and think about kind of how we exist within those two larger systems, how those two larger systems impact our business. So I said a lot there, but I just wanted to quickly kind of go over sort of our 5 pillars, how we think across that climate strategy and how it impacts our business. What I really want to dive into today is really where rubber hits the road, where are we decarbonizing? And this 100% renewable electricity goal, fitting, you can see nested under that net zero carbon operations piece, is a long-term strategy built out into 2 chunks. So we have a first 5-year strategy that we launched in 2021, and then an extended 10-year strategy that'll take us all the way to 2030. That will allow us to get to 100% renewables using actually these 4 key tactics. At all of our sites around the world, it's a combination of these 4 approaches that we'll lean on to actually increase the amount of renewables that we're sourcing year on year. So let's dive into those. Some of this might be familiar or might be reminiscent of what perhaps you guys have seen at other companies or in other strategies, but I'll go through each one by one, and then I actually have kind of a deeper dive set of slides to give more examples. So the first, on-site solar, where we have opportunities and space at our facilities around the world that we operate. Is there a chance for us to then incorporate solar into that site and actually produce energy behind the meter to help feed renewable electricity into that site or into the grid? We do this. We've actually done this at more than 24 sites around the world, more than 5 just last year. It can be really smart business. They can be really smart investments. The challenge that we have is we don't always have the land and the space availability to do this at a scale that makes a really large material impact. But needless to say, it can be a very smart and very strategic investment for us. So where we can and where it makes sense, we definitely invest in solar and will continue to. And then utility green power. So recognizing that all of our sites around the world certainly are connected into grid systems operated by utilities. Those grid systems may or may not have a choice or an option for those sites that are pulling from the grids to source from greener generators. So working with utilities to understand options and understand what's available is something that we incorporated into this strategy in 2021. And happy to say we've actually taken advantage of this in quite a few locations. So I have a couple interesting examples that I'll cover there. But that's how we think of utility green power. Moving to the bottom, we have something called verified RECs, or renewable energy certificates. So these are usually unbundled instruments that we can buy at markets, normally where we don't have as many options available. So there may or may not be opportunities for on-site solar, utility green power, or PPAs. But we utilize this because it's a legitimate system to track where renewable electricity was generated. And if we can support the sources of that renewable electricity, namely solar and wind, then we think that's a net good thing, at least in the short term. And we hope not to rely on it on the long term in a larger scale. But certainly is an important part of the picture and an important part of the overall strategy by 2030. The last one I'll cover, and kind of rounding out the 4, is what we call corporate VPPAs, virtual power purchase agreements, or physical power purchase agreements. In essence, what these are long-term contracts to source renewable power and or renewable electricity certificates, renewable energy certificates, RECs, from a usually new solar or wind farm. So these can be really exciting because, we, Colgate-Palmolive, as a private industry, can potentially work directly with a solar or wind developer in bringing a new asset into existence. It's kind of cool when you think about all the opportunity that entails. So we've done this in a couple of different areas and are exploring in others, but we'll talk about those examples. But this is certainly a complicated tactic, but definitely one of the few that has the biggest opportunities to scale. So when we say get to 100% renewable energy by 2030 at Colgate, we are thinking about it in one of four ways. Ideally, in many situations, we employ all four. So before I get too much deeper into then the specific examples and what we're doing in each of those areas, I thought I would just take a second to kind of level set here. What do we mean by renewable energy? What do we mean truly when we say renewable energy by renewable electricity? So I should have said this up front, but I may use the two interchangeably. So when we say renewable energy or RE, we're really talking about power, electricity. So what does it mean to call it renewable? How would you define that? We thought a lot about this, and what we decided to do was kind of leverage definitions that are, really already out there, um, in the NGO space or in the governmental space that kind of help to bring a standard view of what we call renewable. We want what we call renewable to be kind of the accepted definition of renewable. So this is what we came up with, basically aligned to the EPA and through an organization called RE100. Electricity is renewable if it comes from wind, solar, geothermal, a sustainable biomass or biogas source, or a sustainable hydropower source. Kind of boils down to those five. I'm curious, and we can kind of save this for the Q&A section, but I wonder how many students might have questions about this or challenges. I know sometimes I get questions, why not nuclear, why not other things? But these are the five that we fall back on. Um, as a large corporation or representing a large corporation, where we are today is we're really finding for our own use and our own scale, it normally comes down to wind and solar. Geothermal just isn't as available at scale and certainly not at the same cost as wind and solar. Biomass and biogas, we're not as much looking into that for scope 2 and electricity. And hydro normally comes down to existing assets funded by a state or a government. So normally, that's not an opportunity for us to actually source RECs from and prove that we're getting that renewable electricity from. So it generally comes down to wind and solar. So going back to the strategy here, let's go one by one and talk through some examples as it relates to each of the tactics. The first, on-site solar. So what does this look like for Colgate? As I mentioned previously, so we today have more than 24 facilities around the world that have actually installed this technology. Just a couple examples of those are shown. Can provide a really lucrative investment. Obviously helps our sites to decarbonize and also provides a source of savings because we're generating electricity on those sites normally quite cheap and certainly cheaper than it is compared to the grid. While that's all positive and great opportunities, what we've noticed is the payback on these investments varies pretty widely by region. And there are a few different reasons for that. But the biggest downside here is that, just space. We don't simply have enough roof space, as you can see on the left, or ground space on the right, to get to a very large, meaningful portion of our site's electricity. You normally see, somewhere well under 100% based on what we can install and what we have capacity for. So it could be a really good investment, engages employees. Certainly, it's an incredible thing to see as you're driving up to a site or approaching a site, but we know there's got to be more to kind of supplement our journey to 100%. So therein comes utility green power, another great opportunity for us working with utilities, the folks that are experts in grid scale renewable energy assets. They certainly do it for a living. I think it's safe to say. How can we work with them to then source renewable energy? One of my personal favorite programs that kind of falls under this category is community solar. So we look for many opportunities, particularly in the US, starting to look in Europe and elsewhere, where we can help subscribe to an existing or sometimes a new renewable asset in a community and support that asset by being an anchored tenant, signing a long-term contract to ensure that that asset can exist for a long period of time. And that asset owner can help to continue to make money for a long period of time. When we sign on to these assets, it also helps to ensure that then renewable electricity from that asset is available to community members in that city, in that town. So in other words, a company like Colgate can help sign on to a community solar project or community choice aggregated project. It has a few different names, and help to ensure that solar then at cheap rates is sourced by community members. Kind of a win-win, right? We help to make sure we get renewable energy, community members get a cheap source of power. The community at large now has a way to decarbonize. It can be a really cool thing. So this is a project we got from or excuse me, a picture of a project that we have in our site in Maine, relatively close to our manufacturing facility. One of the downsides, community solar is and a lot of utility green power options just aren't always available. Depending on where we operate, utilities might be regulated and simply not offering options for green power, or not offering those to the private sector. Um, so where we can, we try to have those conversations, and sometimes there are opportunities, other times it's more of a waiting game to see what becomes available. The third tactic that I'll cover and kind of talk through some examples is RECs, renewable energy certificates. So I'm curious to see if we get any questions on this. I think it has become a hot topic, and one of those topics that hits the headlines periodically. But yes, we utilize renewable energy certificates. What are they? How would we define them, and why are they useful? So what I first want to describe is a little bit of like a scenario. Imagine you're a solar farm developer. You built a solar farm. You have all of your permitting and your interconnection requirements completed. So now you're getting ready to tie in that solar farm, you could also say wind farm, into the grid. In order for you to be, a self-sustaining project, you're going to need to ensure you can sell that power into the grid at a good price and make money. Let's say you have a state or corporations that that are existing around that asset that also want to get an opportunity to source this green power. And let's just say it's 3 different companies, company A, B, C, and the state D. And let's say each of those entities has goals, how much power they want to source. Company A wants to get to 100% by 2030. Maybe company B is by 2040. Maybe company C just wants to do it out of the goodness of their own heart. And maybe the state has a requirement. They pass legislation that says they need to get to 50% renewable by 2030, 2040. If you're that asset operator, how do you track the megawatt hours of renewable electricity that you're generating to go to company A, B, C, and the state D to potentially sell them that renewable electricity? It's an interesting challenge. I don't know if anyone has a solution, but the best solution that I've heard of, and I believe that the market's been able to come up with, is known as the REC. It's basically a tracking system for renewable electricity. And so your wind farm, your solar farm, thanks to the REC, now has 2 ways that it can make revenue. It sells the physical power into the grid and would make money in whatever agreement that it has in place with the grid operator. It then has an opportunity to sell a separate instrument, the REC, and it can go to company A, B, C, and D and create some type of contract perhaps, or they could also just decide to sell them into the market, whatever method they choose. But they have essentially another revenue stream to help make that project bankable, to help ensure that project stays in existence, and then have really a source of confidence for company ABC or the state D that wants to ensure they can prove the electricity that they're buying is renewable. They can buy the power in this case, and then they can also buy the REC. When they buy the REC, they and only they can then claim, lay claim to that energy being renewable. They can choose to retire that REC in their name so that nobody else can ever claim that that renewable electricity was used. So in my mind, it's an imperfect system, but it's a system. And the REC that we're talking about is really what we go out to market and buy in different volumes every year in many different markets around the world. So every REC, unfortunately, is not created equal. You have different types from different assets. You can get them from hydro, from wind, from solar. The list goes on. And then, of course, they have different price points. So we've created our own internal criteria to buy what we think is one of the top quality, top tier RECs, depending on the market. And again, we think of it as a tracking system. So it can be a really useful tool. We tend to think of it more as a shorter term tool, especially if we buy them unbundled separate from the power. This illustration, this graphic was really just meant to drive the point home to get a better feel for what we mean by two different types of products coming off of a potential wind farm or solar farm. The REC and then the power. So that is what a REC is. And the last tactic that I'll cover and give some examples of are corporate VPPAs. So what are these and how does this contribute to a company like Colgate getting to our goal of 100% renewable electricity? A power purchase agreement, whether virtual or physical, is a long-term contract that allows consumers or large commercial entities like a company like Colgate to source renewable energy certificates, RECs, from a specific renewable energy project. Where it becomes exciting is these projects can be new or additional, and the developer could potentially approach a company like Colgate with an offer to buy RECs for a long period of time that then helps to justify, from a financial standpoint, their investors giving them the capital money to make that investment in that project. So the term calls that additionality, or excuse me, the industry calls that term additionality. And the industry in general has responded very favorably to this approach and this tactic. So my understanding is 2010, 2011 was one of the first times a VPPA was even completed. It was kind of something that came to life thanks to the tech industry. Google was an early pioneer. Fast forwarding to today, this is one of the largest approaches, one of the most popular approaches that large corporate entities and private entities like Colgate utilize to source renewable electricity. Thousands and thousands of these deals are getting done every day in the US and Europe and other parts of the world. So very excited to see that this continue to grow. Excited that corporates, not just states, not just utilities, are now a part of the picture, demanding renewable energy assets coming into existence and really helping to make sure they become justified and get commissioned. So it's pretty cool to see. There are some reports that I've read that show in some parts of the world, more renewable energy assets are getting built because of the private sector and corporates than the public sector and government. It's pretty mind-blowing to me. So excited to see that that's part of the solution, but I hope, personally speaking, I hope governments also step up too and accelerate the deployment of those assets as well. So let's talk a little bit about then what we've been able to achieve. Just based on what's kind of public information, what I'm able to share today is we actually signed our first VPPA here in the US in 2023. So that's actually a picture of that project. It's in Texas. It's a new asset, so we have that additionality component that we're very proud of, and we are the only off-taker of RECs from that project, which is even more exciting. So when it becomes operating and commissions in 2025, it will be the source of more than enough electricity we need in the U.S. So we'll be able to claim for a U.S. company that we're 100% renewable electricity thanks to this source of renewable energy certificates. So I covered a lot. What we covered is really our 2030 strategy and beyond, and the 4 key tactics to get to 100% renewables. You might be wondering, okay, so we started this journey, as I mentioned, in 2021. We were somewhere around the 30% range for how much renewable electricity we're sourcing. Where do you guys think we are today? How much renewable electricity do you think Colgate-Palmolive sources, or sourced, I should say, as of year-end 2023? I don't know that I can accept an answer from Mahir or Christy. Anybody want to jump in? There's Christy raising her hand. See, I saw that coming. If it's easier to send it, if it's easier to send a chat message, I don't want to bring too much chaos to this.
Yeah, typically I ask them to hold their questions until the very end, but again, they can actually jump in at this time.
This was more for interaction. I was just trying to lively it up.
Yeah,
Anybody have a guess?
Yeah, Maurice says 30%.
30%. Anyone else?
Christy has given a frown face, like, and
Oh, I'm not picking on you, Christy. I know she knows the answer. It's the only reason I said that. So
harsh 40%. Like,
40%. Okay.
yeah.
The answer is 60. So thanks to these tactics and this scaled deployment of these tactics around the world, Colgate has been able to source 60% of our renewable electricity from renewables as of 2023. So that's a cool milestone. It's more than half, and we're not going back, right? We have to continue to make progress year on year after that. And of course, as we know, every percentage of renewable electricity we're able to increase means some scaled amount of carbon emissions in our Scope 2 category are then being reduced, which is amazing progress to see. So I'll wrap up here. Again, I covered a lot, and really this is a combination of some of my own opinions, but mainly the main source of information is from our sustainability social impact reports. We have a whole website dedicated to this. I wanted to put the link there. I'm sure you won't be able to actually click that, but if you want to Google those keywords, or if we share these slides and information afterwards, you'll be able to click it. But that's kind of our homepage where we have various reports, including our annual climate report. We have our KPI table. You're able to dig into more of our performance metrics and information. We have more about some of our social strategies too. If you were to read this report, there's a lot more there that kind of connects back to the overall approach that we've made and progress that we've made, even beyond climate. So this is my last slide. Thank you guys for listening.
Oh, like you managed to make it like not only in time, actually before time. That's good.
I guess I talked a little fast in some points there.
Yeah. Like we have about 12 minutes for questions. Before anybody starts questioning you, like let me ask you one thing that
Sure.
like how do you like find it in a corporate sector? Like when you propose these kind of things, like does your C-suite people frown at it? They like it? They, like how is the general reaction uh, when you propose these, modifications that will obviously cost a lot of money?
Yeah, it's a really good question. A lot of this I like to think of as kind of a puzzle. So, certainly in years prior, if we're going all the way back to many years ago, coming up with these ideas and pitching these projects before we have some of these big targets and big goals was much different. So then we would basically have to build a business case and kind of sell the idea of the projects, and they would have to rest more on the financials, right? Does it help to the company to save money, or kind of how do you answer the why? It's a little bit more in that point in time about the resiliency or the finances. Thanks to where we've gone on this journey, building our carbon reporting strategy over the years, getting to the point that we have the SBTI approved net zero target. Everything is kind of built into itself. Appreciate it. Thank you. And members of our sustainability team were cheering me on as they were walking by. Apologies. We then been able to lay that into the business case, Dibs. So in other words, we know we have a goal to get to by 2040.
Right.
We know we have a milestone to get to 100% renewable by 2030. It's now not a question of do we do it? It's when and at what scale, which is a really beautiful chance for us to then just build out the business case in different ways. So we can do that. We can say, hey, all right, what if we simply did only on-site solar and we're going to get to this goal by 2030 with that tactic and that tactic alone? There are ways for us to actually estimate that, and we have. And then we can do the same for the different tactics. And we can kind of pair them against one another to come up with price ranges and scales and time lengths for us to say, hey, we could do all these things in 2021, or we could build them out over years and kind of do them strategically. You could also do the opposite, right? You can kind of backload them and do everything in 2029. So these different scenarios of what we're talking about, we've been very strategic about and kind of put out there in front of our leadership, who've reacted very favorably. Because what our leadership wants to see is they want us to hold to our goals. They want us to be able to show year-on-year progress. And, honestly, they want us to balance implementation of these approaches and goals just like it's any other business initiative.
Okay.
Right? So carbon needs to be reduced. We need to spend money. how do we do it in a way that we're kind of optimizing that investment? I'm proud to say that, so we've kind of nailed down how to, little bit of a art and a science, but we've nailed down how to kind of make the sales pitch for different projects, and it's been quite favorable, the reactions. Actually, the reactions we've gotten more recently are how can we do it faster?
Yeah, clearly you guys have a very good plan, and I was worried about the sales pitch, but again,
It's, I guess, long story short,
after.
what I'm trying to say is when you have these targets, the sales
Mm,
pitch really helps to build itself at that point, right? Because then we have nervous leadership that wants us to ensure we hit these targets. So now we can kind of come to the
okay,
table. Yeah.
yeah.